Hello, my name is Christopher Blake Lane, and for my midterm project, I decided to discuss the assigned video, Dr. Ben in Kemet. For this project, I decided that I wanted to share this information with my younger cousin who has just recently graduated high school. I figured that it would be good knowledge for somebody who was raised in a dominantly white area with a very heavy Eurocentric influence on education. I felt that this was good knowledge for him to obtain. As the large portion of the information that I had presented to him was essentially brand new as it wasn't taught to him in school, his reactions were very widespread, I realized. Much of his reactions were shock, others were almost disbelief, because of the fact that, Eurocentrism has been so heavily intertwined with our education systems that it was hard for him to truly believe that what I was telling him was, not just made up or theory. And some of the information that I had shared with him regarded the creation of monotheism by the Egyptian pharaoh Akhenaten, if I did pronounce that correctly. That was something that when I first told him, he was kind of, resistant against. He didn't quite believe it. But, after I had shown him the videos and elaborated more on what had, Dr. Ben had spoken on within the videos, I had noticed that there was more gears starting to turn in his head and realizing that, he had been taught from a specific perspective on the creation of religion and spiritual systems in general. He had learned from only one perspective, and that is one thing that I enjoyed being able to witness the wheels begin to turn in his head just simply from being able to speak, one little fact. And another thing that I had spoken to him about was the use of symbolism there in Kemet, and how that has continued on forward, even until now. That symbolism is a huge part of humanity, understanding how to navigate this world that we live in. Another example that I had used to further explain this use of symbolism comes from the statues of the pharaohs outside of their temples. For example, when you can see the pharaohs standing with their arms crossed with the two objects in each hand, that is a representation of them no longer being here. And that was something that, everybody has seen these statues, whether it's in their history books or whatnot, but they were not taught the symbolism as to what these statues are presenting. And after I had continued to elaborate more and more of the details that I had found within Dr. Ben's video, I then decided that I would give him a brief background on Africana studies as well as what the African diaspora truly is. After explaining that, I then kind of put him in the mindset of understanding how, with that knowledge, you can then accurately track the progression spiritually, physically, mentally, on all facets, the progression of that specific group. I then took the time to explain to him the difference between Afrocentricity and Eurocentricity, particularly in the world of education. And then I wanted to give him insight on how it has unconsciously shaped the way that he perceives the moments in history that he has been educated. I then explained to him how Afrocentricity aims to focus a form of education on a more truthful and direct form of African culture, history, spirituality, and all other aspects, and incorporate that into the education system to make it truly more multiculturally well-rounded. Whereas Eurocentricity aims to tell the story of many different cultures, ethnic groups, and whatnot through the eyes of the Europeans. Whereas in that case, you don't truly understand history. You just understand history from the eyes of one side. And to further explain how in education that, Eurocentricity affects, ethnic groups, different ethnic groups, I use the example of the words black and white in our dictionaries. How when you look up the words black and you look at the adjectives underneath it, many times those adjectives are holding negative connotations. And then when you go and look up the word white, you have word adjectives such as bright and things that uplift the word, whereas the word black gets pulled down and put into a more negative light. And that right there is what got him to truly understand what Eurocentricity. I then gave him a quick insight on the definitions of epistemology, and then continued on to just explaining to him using an example out of Dr. Ben's video, where he says that it is important for people to understand that the findings in Kemet were created and utilized by African people. And as Dr. Ben says, it is important to say this because it has been said otherwise due to Eurocentricity, the hiding of accurate history, and how that, if that continues, history can be completely dominated by one group. And that is a very dangerous place to live in because, as we know, we are taught history so that we do not repeat it. And if we are taught incorrectly, then we have a very high chance of repeating these instances. And not only that, but by hiding the history of a people or trying to claim one's history as their own, you completely suppress the voices and the validity of that group. Because when you control the narrative, then you can say this happened, that happened, and whatnot. So that is essentially just what I explained to him. And at this point in our discussion, I've realized that, it's almost like a whole new world in his head. And that was something that I really enjoyed to be able to witness. And as we have been taught through class and, repeatedly through the assigned readings, the symbol of, in Kemet, in Kemetic tradition, the symbol of truth, justice, balance, and order is all combined into the goddess Ma'at. And I then provided him insight into what Ma'at is, the symbolism connected with it, and just the true history as to how the philosophy of Ma'at and doing good and the importance of humanity is at the core. And that is what really set him over, because he understands that we live in a world that is dominantly materialistic and self-centered, which sadly enough is due to the Eurocentric influence on today's. And after being able to introduce him to Ma'at, and as well as the other things earlier, Dr. Ben's video and the concepts of Eurocentricity and Afrocentricity and just everything that I had presented to him, he has actually taken it onto himself to then, and he wants me to continue to show him more videos and more readings, but he wants to understand things in a more well-rounded way. Because, like I said, we were both raised in an area that is dominantly white with a very, very, very heavy influence of Eurocentricity in our education system. And now that I've been able to bring this to light for him, he now understands that, hey, I have to relearn things. I have to develop the most well-rounded mindset I can. So that is essentially how our discussion had gone, and it was wonderful for me to be able to educate not only a family member of mine, but somebody who does belong. He has white skin. He is white. So this allows him to not only develop his own new perspective on the world around him, but he can then go teach it to other people that look like him. And that is what struck me the most as being important, because for people of color, it is hard for our voice to carry in white spaces. But when there is an individual who belongs there, but actively chases a more well-rounded approach to education, that voice carries a lot more than what this skin, or a person with this skin color would. So all in all, I enjoyed being able to share the information I had found with him, and just allowing more room for growth within his own world.